Good afternoon. I can see all the panelists and the moderator for today. So we'll begin the discussion. Welcome to this discussion on a very important topic, which is on pathways for aligning skill mapping in line with international labor market demand. So it is an important topic of discussion for ICM because in the numerous discussions that we have been holding in the past, it has come up as an important area of intervention, whereby it has been repeatedly reiterated that even though skilling infrastructure is present in the country, we need to do more to map skills in line with the demands that we see in the destination country. So it is against that light that we seek to organize a series of panel discussions, this being the first in that. So we welcome you all to this discussion, Shri Yogeshwar Sangwan, PGE, who has graciously agreed to do the inaugural remarks. Moderator Shabri Nair, who is the Regional Migration Labour Specialist for the South Asia region. And the distinguished panel, Professor Rajan from CDS Trivandrum, Sri Rajkumar from Navis Japan, Mr. Krishnan Narayanan, and Naga Bharati from Tomcom. Without waiting further, I would request PG sir to give his inaugural remarks.
Thank you, Swati. Good afternoon, distinguished panel, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to address this consultation on pathways for aligning skill mapping with international labor market, Southern edition, organized by ICM, that has a representation from a diverse set of stakeholders ranging from RAs, skill centers, state departments, international organizations, and academicians. We have a conversation on a theme that will greatly benefit our workforce. With India's working age group population set to grow, skill mapping can create an ecosystem to identify the strengths of the migrants and accustom them to the occupational demands of destination countries. India has done this successfully with Japan in the specified skilled workers scheme, providing for a new status of residency by Japan in 2019, where skilled Indian nationals can work and reside in Japan. It establishes a basic framework for organized mobility between the countries. Furthermore, in line with Government of India's vision to transform India into the skill capital of the world, a G2G skill harmonization framework was also signed between India and UAE to enhance cooperation and recognition of qualifications. Under the MOU, NSDC is working with Ministry of Human Resource and Emiratization and Abu Dhabi Quality and Conformity Council for benchmarking, qualifications, assessment, and certification of skills in different sectors. I would like to add that besides the traditional skill sets, the world of work will witness a range of skills that will be in demand, and India needs to be prepared for that. Futuristic skills are set to witness a demand in destinations like Europe and Gulf, and these need to be incorporated in the upskilling of workers in sectors like healthcare, which has already witnessed digitization following the pandemic. I look forward to hearing your deliberations, which will add to gaining a comprehensive understanding of the situation at hand. I welcome all of you to this discussion, and I hope it will stimulate constructive conversations that can inform policy making in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your inaugural remarks. Let me now introduce you all to our moderator for the day, who will subsequently introduce you to the panel. Shabri has recently taken up the position of Labor Migration Specialist for South Asia. He is based out of the New Delhi office currently. He provides technical advisory services to 7 countries in the sub-region. Before joining the Decent Work team, he was leading ILO's work on global migration policy, including the intergovernmental negotiations for the Global Compact on Migration. He was also the focal point for Asia and Middle East in the Labor Migration branch in Geneva. Prior to joining ILO, Shabri has worked with the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, Federal Department of Foreign Affairs, Government of Switzerland. Shabri is quite well known to the audience present here today, so I'll hand over the floor to Shabri for taking forward the discussion today. Over to you, Shabri.
Thank you very much, Surabhi. Perhaps just for my one specific clarification, Surabhi, if you could show me a thumbs up if you can hear me.
I can, but you'll have to be a little louder. It was a little feeble.
Okay. Right, I think this should do it. Thanks so much. Really appreciate the opportunity, Surabhi. And once again, congratulations to ICM and MEA for bringing us together in this conversation, which I refer to Yogeshwar sir in his opening remarks, looking at it in a futuristic perspective, because that's what we need to do. And over the course of the next 1.5 hours, or a little less than that, this is what I will be urging and encouraging our panelists to do. You know, when Surabhi sent us all the concept note, you would have all seen the very first line of the concept note. The first line of the concept note reads, "Skills development and training occupy a central position in achieving sustainable growth and are drivers of economic development in the 21st century." And for me, that particular sentence resonated in a very big way, because when we talk about sustainable growth from a policy perspective, I've always been a policy person. Coming into the conversations, I was taken back to 2015. 2015, when the government of India, along with 192 other countries, unanimously adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, or the 2030 Agenda. And in that context of adopting the Sustainable Development Goals, which was based on the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, we moved from 8 goals to 17 goals in the SDGs. We moved from 18 targets in the MDGs to 48, 269 targets, and then from 48 indicators to 252 global indicators in the SDGs. But the reason I mention this is because if you go back just 21 years back when the MDGs were first adopted in 2000, there is not a single reference to skills. In fact, at the time, the conversation was, of course, there are references to education and so on, but at the time, the conversation was much more focused on health. In fact, it was only in 2015 that the international community decided, despite this being a Christmas tree approach, there needs to be an entirety of issues that needs to be reflected in as a result of what the world had seen in terms of development over those 15 years of the MDG's existence. And in those 17 goals in the SDGs, perhaps the one that is goal number 4 on lifelong education and perspectives around lifelong learning, particularly talk about the importance of skills development. There then, from 2015, we move on to 2018, and Surabhi mentioned about me working in the Global Compact for Migration, specifically there again at the international level, and the government of India being one of the biggest pushers of the goal 18 on skills development in the Global Compact for Migration, the objective 18, that really focused on the importance of weaving skills within the migration context. In fact, that turned out to be one of the pivotal ways in which the India national statement in Morocco was almost tailor-made in the context of labor migration and skills development for migrant workers from India. Now, keeping all of this in mind, the ILO came back in 2019, and in 2019 adopted the Centenary Declaration. The ILO, as you know, is 102 years old. And in those 102 years, we adopted a Centenary Declaration on our 100th anniversary, specifically talking about the importance of the future of work. So for me, everything that Yogeshwar sir said right at the beginning really links in to that future in terms of how the Sustainable Development Goals were adopted, how the Global Compact for Migration was put in place, and then the future of work perspectives that was consolidated through the ILO Centenary Declaration. Look, we have a very interesting panel, and we need to hear from every one of them. The four panelists who I will introduce shortly are really esteemed in their own fields. I've had the opportunity of certainly interacting with three of them. One particular panelist is someone I will be introduced to myself over the course of this particular session. We'll start with Professor Irudaya Rajan. Professor Rajan, again.
Online.
May I request everybody to kindly mute their microphones when you're not talking? That will make it easier for the panelists as well. Thank you very much. The first speaker will be Professor Rajan. He needs no introduction, and whatever introduction I give Professor Rajan, I will be doing a disservice to him. Except to say this, he has been a tremendous tour de force of migration intellectually and practically for India in his various work streams, in his experience, in what he has brought from the ground through his evidence collection, through his research capacity, all the way up to policy making. And this has been very, very important. So Professor Rajan, we're really looking forward to hearing you. The second panelist will be Mr. Krishnan Narayanan. In fact, I've had the opportunity of interacting with and listening to Krishnan prior to this in an entire webinar that was organized by MEA and ICM in the context of Japan. And there, having listened to Krishnan, become a big fan of his and really beginning to understand, perhaps for me as a South Asia specialist, what Japan brings to the table in these conversations, and of course the MOC that was recently signed between the governments of India and Japan. So Krishnan, welcome, and looking forward to hearing from you as well. Our third panelist will be Mr. S. Rajkumar, who this is for me the first time of the pleasure of being introduced to. So pleasure, Mr. Rajkumar, having you here. Mr. Rajkumar is the chairman and director of the human resources company based out of Japan called Navis Japan. He is an experienced entrepreneur in diversified industries globally. He founded the Navis Group in 2002 with his guiding aim to enhance the efficiency of human capital across countries and organizations, as well as to help enhance one's individual growth by providing relevant sector-specific skills. I'll tell you, Mr. Rajkumar, this is perhaps the only bio that I will read, but the next time I get to, over the course of the next 1.5 hours as I get to know you, this will not be read anymore. If I ever have the pleasure and the honor of introducing you, I will straight away refer to what you bring to the table. So looking forward to hearing from you as well. And Ms. Nagabharati, who I've had the opportunity and the pleasure of meeting quite a few times, particularly when I started off here. Ms. Bharti is the general manager of TomCom, the Telangana Overseas Manpower Company, somebody who has been playing such an important role from a state perspective. So Ms. Bharti, welcome. And it's been a while since I've last seen you, so I'm really looking forward to hearing from you as well. And I can see that big smile on your face. Right. So with that, without further ado, here are the rules of the game. I'm going to keep it very simple, very easy for all of us to take it in. I'm going to ask the panelists, rather than getting the panelists to just speak about everything under the sky, because someone like Professor Rajan, and I'm sure Krishnan as well, and And Bharti, I'm sure that if I ask you to talk about this from an overarching perspective, you would all be experts in the relevant matter. So I'm going to try and guide these discussions through specific questions aimed at each one of you. We will have now, it's currently 3:15. It's 3:15. We have about 45 minutes to 50 minutes. I would say let's take about 10 minutes per panelist. 10 minutes per panelist. Let's aim to finish this by 4 o'clock. At the end of the 8th minute, I will chime in while you're speaking. So forgive me for interrupting. I will chime in to just say, please close up in the next 2 minutes. And that will be the end of your time. And then I will move on to the next panelist. That will give us considerable time to also hear from the audience present here. So with that, I will start with Professor Rajan, but specifically Professor Rajan, I wanted to get a sense from you in terms of, we're looking at the southern part of the country now. And Mr. Rajan, you're based in Kerala, you have a Tamil background, you're pan-Indian, you're also strongly South Indian. And I wanted to get a sense from you about this. What are the specific skills that you are seeing in the southern states that will have advantages given the demand for Indian workers abroad in current times? And I specifically focus that because I've heard you, Professor Rajan, I've heard you talk about the importance of nurses, for instance. I've heard you talk about healthcare professionals coming from the south of the country. I've heard you talk about entrepreneurs that are coming from the south of the country. I've heard you also specifically talk about how recruitment and skills link in with each other. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. But if you could look at these elements from a southern India perspective, give that focus, that would be an absolutely enlightening experience. Professor Rajan, over to you, sir. Your 10 minutes starts now.
Thank you, Safari, and thank you. Not getting the name now. Our ICM chief for inviting me. I just want to start off. I think something very, very important in the skill context is that, as I always tell every time, we have no idea on the skill sets available to the people. I think there is not even a single survey currently exists to understand what type of skills people have, where is the mismatch, and where we can really put our skills or even put our money for skilling. Now, what is called 2 points I want to make here. One is that we have right now India skill. It's a big project India itself having. And Kerala, I was working with ASAP, Additional Skills Capability Program in Kerala. It is also part of the Indian government and Kerala government. We are not able to really locate who is good in what. I think that type of data we don't have. Take the example of returned migrants who came during the Vande Bharat flights. We were started collecting some skills, but still the skills are not really spelled out by either by the migrants or by the government or even by the recruitment agents. So what we should do, or what we know right now, for example, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and maybe Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh, I have done what is called the so-called the Kerala Migration Survey for the last 20 years now. We are running 8 rounds of surveys. If you look at it, whatever skills people have in Kerala, somehow their mindset, which I told to a few days back to the Kerala government, the mindset is Gulf-centric. It has to go. But I told one of the meeting, NARCA should not even start recruitment, because NARCA has to look after the welfare of the migrants, skills of the migrants. You are a recruitment agent? Sorry, you could not do much for the last 20 years. So I think the point is that if you look at it, that is Gulf-centric. That has to change. Once you change that Gulf-centric, the mindset, then only you will start about skilling. I think that is something you can learn from the data. What we have is that think beyond Gulf. Of course, I saw in the note that we are talking about India-Japan collaboration. That also brings to me one important point, but I was very pleased when you look at the title of the meeting, skill mapping for international labor migration. as I know, I was part of the migration policy prepared several years back with Professor Mr. Krishna Kumar and so many other people. We were talking about facilitating legal, safe and orderly migration. This was the migration policy spelled out by the Indian government. Today, I am seeing, at least a little bit openly, promoting safe, orderly and legal migration. I think the promotion has to come in very much open. I think we don't need to play, I was telling many times, don't play hide and seek role. Because today India has a demographic dividend. And India currently having the highest unemployment rate. So you can't give employment to the coming youth. So they have to look for employment outside India or outside anywhere. If the coronavirus, I have not seen, it has no passport, it has no visas, it traveled to 200 plus countries. I think definitely Malayali can travel. Skills. And we are all trying to close the border, but it is crossing the border. It goes to London now. I was told in London they have an Indian migrant. So we are trying to close. Kerala is close to Tamil Nadu. We are closing the border, but it is moving. So it can move. If you have your skills, you can move beyond. I think that change, two changes I am expecting. One is the government, both state and central government, to promote. Tell them next 5 years, I will place, India's will say we'll place so many people in so many countries. Nothing wrong with that. That will create then you will start talking about skills. What skill required in Japan may be different in what skill required in Germany and what skill required in maybe in Nigeria. So I think that first of all, you have to motivate yourself. I think that is something very important. Second thing, also the skills. When I look at Kerala, and when I'm sitting in Kerala, 90% of them are in the Gulf. When the Vande Bharat flight started coming in, I was looking, is there any flight will come from other than Gulf to Kerala? I told the Kerala government, if the virus comes back, of course we have a now second wave, there should be a flight straight from New York to Trivandrum. Why? And many of the people who are in New York or in Toronto, which I'm doing a study right now, 40% of the people who are living in Toronto were sometimes spent in the Gulf countries. They were using Gulf as a vehicle to move. I think this, the Vande Bharat flight, I could not see any flight coming from other than, Dubai, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, Kuwait. What is this? And look at Tamil Nadu, which my survey clearly indicate, they have diversified their countries. They have diversified. Singapore, Malaysia coming back. Only half of the Tamilians are in the Gulf countries. So I think if you, on the same survey, we replicated in Punjab and Gujarat. The patterns are different. The migration corridors are different. I think that is what I tell, that we should think of a large-scale database to understand what skills we acquire. Of course, Kerala is known for health workers. Kerala is known for domestic workers. In fact, the definition of skills. Do you know who is low skilled? For example, people tell me that, the domestic worker, they say low skilled. They can make good biryani, I cannot make. So how do you tell them low skill? So even defining skills, you see, because something I am better, something is they are better. I can't do, somebody makes a very good, like there are shops we know in Kerala, people will queue up for what is called dum biryani. I cannot make dum biryani. That means, please remember, there is a skill in here. So domestic worker, even I should not tell them they are unskilled or low skilled. They have skills. Maybe the skill is not bringing more money. When you talk about money terms, then you can talk about low skills, semi-skilled, medium skilled, high skilled. And even high skilled also sometimes do low skilled job in Canada, for example. Some people are even de-skilled. In the Gulf, some of you probably, somebody should know, many Indians are being de-skilled in the Gulf. I have seen them. So de-skilling also happening, not just, upgrading skills. I think India can play a major role, and of course, South have a lot of experience. And as I was telling earlier, now the Kerala, Tamil Nadu has to vacate from the low skills, because the low skills are coming back from our neighboring countries like Bangladesh and Nepal. I don't think any Kerala should compete with Nepalis or even from Uttar Pradesh. So they have to upgrade. So you want to go, if the migration has to continue, I was telling them, for Kerala, at any point of time, there should be 20 lakh migrants outside the country. There should be your minimum you require, and at least 100,000 crores coming as remittances. These are the basic thing Kerala requires. For that, they have to improve the skills. They should go beyond Gulf. But I'm telling every meeting to the government, don't think Gulf. You should learn from the COVID-19. COVID-19 has shown us, and COVID-19 is going to open up more opportunities. People are telling me many times, migration is winded up. I'm sorry. COVID is going to bring lot of changes. There will be large-scale migration. Even you cannot even imagine. I was telling, imagining migration. I think that time skill will play a major role. And if you can put your skills in an orderly way, I think India will play a major role in immigration. We are number one, but the number one with 20 million, no, we have to improve ourselves. Thank you, Sabari.
No, thank you so much. 7 minutes, 55 seconds. This is fantastic, but I'm also looking at it from another perspective. You know, you're saying, Rajan sir, that the mindset of the Keralite is Gulf-centric, and I should know that I grew up in the Gulf thanks to my father having migrated from this small village in Palakkad and then moving up to Qatar, which is where I grew up. I fully understand what you're saying. This requires not just that change in mindset, this requires a change in culture almost. And I'm curious to know if this will happen overnight or it will take more than a generation to change that mindset. So it'd be interesting, you know, as you were talking about it, talking about the biryani makers. And of course, I don't see biryani making alone as the future of skilling. We have a whole range of things that we need to discuss there. But, you know, I was thinking about, you know, when my father first went to Bombay, which is always the crucial thing when we, you know, when South Indians go to a North Indian state, they don't necessarily know how to explain themselves in Hindi. So my father asked his older brother who was there, Bhai, if somebody asks me something, what do I tell them? He said 2 words, Malum nahi. Anytime anybody asks you anything, just say Malum nahi. And so he would always end up catching the local train in Bombay, and flying from Andheri to Ambernath, which is the other end of Bombay. And so there, when he would be asked, for instance, hey, utarne ka hai kya? And he'd say, Malum nahi, pagal hai sala, right? This is how the general perception is, but not keeping in mind the fact that at the end of the day, even language is a skill. Today, my father, after having spent, 14 years in Bombay, speaks fluent Hindi, Marathi, and Gujarati as a Malayali. And I think that is what also is important for us to keep in mind. So very well recognized the points that you've made, Rajan sir. I do think at some point you need to come in to say, right, what are the advantages? Please keep that in mind as well when we look at what kind of specific advantages do we need to look at within the labor market in the context of skills. I think you can come to that towards the end of the discussions. So that would be good to hear from you. Right, my next speaker is Mr. Krishnan Narayanan, the CEO of Nihon Edutech and CII partner for the TITP. Krishnan sir, you know, when I was looking at the questions and the guidance that was given by ICM in the context of particularly this particular panel, I was thinking about the kind of conversations you had with us in that webinar. Kindly mute. Thank you. I was listening. You know, I was taken back to the conversation. You had, Surabhi, can you hear me? I see on the chat somebody saying, Professor Viba Arora saying that my voice is disappearing. I don't know if it's just...
You're audible, Shabri.
I'm audible. Okay, thanks. Thank you, Professor Arora. If you could kindly check your sound setting. So, Krishnan sir, I was, I was taken back when I heard that you were going to be on this panel. I was taken back to the conversations that we had in the Japan-oriented session. And that Japan-oriented session was the futuristic one, was the one that where there was a lot of conversations about technology and skills. You know, one of the things that I was struck by in a recent conversation with the employers' organizations here in India was them telling us that, and this is in the context of internal migration, you know, the migrant workers who went back home, they told us, well, you know, Shabri, maybe we will try and make do with the people we have. Yeah, about 70% of our workers have gone back. 30%, we are now going to try and automate. So using the automation, we are going to make do with the 30% workforce. But is that possible when you also need to upskill those workers, when you also need to ensure those skills, right? So in the broader perspective, looking at some of the questions that we've been thinking about for this panel, what are the demand for futuristic skills that we're talking about in the context of logistics, AI, cloud computing, and similar soft skills? I mean, you've been in all these spaces, right? But is it possible, do you think, out of the 1.3 billion people, how many can really have access to this? And I've heard you specifically also mentioning some of these elements in the previous conversation. Krishnan sir, over to you.
Thank you very much, Shabri, and thanks ICM and everyone else, the panelists as well, for the opportunity. As Mr. Shabri said, it's nice to speak again on this topic. Now, I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with, some of these acronyms we are throwing around, TITP. I think specified skilled workers is something that was mentioned in the Word document that was sent around. But quite a lot of acronyms. So I would just give a set of context a little bit in terms of specifically focusing on Japan. And yes, Japan, language is a skill that's needed, but in the context of skills, education, I think, other skills are also equally important. It's not just the language that matters. Language does matter, but, along with language skill, we need the other skills as well. So Japan, today, if you look at some of the numbers that are being talked about, one of these studies that I had, access to, right? And what, this is a McKinsey study. This is an expected labor shortage is somewhere around 1.5 million in Japan in this decade, right? By 2030, that's supposed to be the, this thing. Now, with the current population decline that's happening in Japan, if they were to keep pace just to maintain the GDP rate, they would need something like 2.5 times productivity improvement. Yes, I think IoT, automation is going to be a significant part of it. And we all know that Japan has been automated. I mean, I remember myself, I was part of the first wave of IT migrants to Japan. I mean, in those late 80s and early 90s, when I went out of India as an IT migrant myself, I had, I don't know, should I say fortune or misfortune of going to Japan instead of US, because in those days, all of us in IT, we were all going towards the US, and I somehow landed in Japan. But we always be awed by the fact that, so much of automation in Japan, doors just open as you walk by and, whatnot. So the basic, the touch and feel automation that was there has been there for more than 20, 30 years. But today, for the population decline and the kind of maintenance of the GDP rates, they need at least 2.5 times productivity improvement. And that's a lot of, technology that needs to be put in. So to your question, Shabri, the demand that's probably required, and that's being talked about right now and what we call as frontier IT skills, right, is around 800,000 in Japan. So we are talking about AI, IoT, and, variety of automations that needs to be done. So it's a huge ask. And, at any point in time, even today, if you see open positions, and I'm sure my friend Rajkumar, would be able to shed more light as he's on the ground. Today, any open position, if you take, there is 40, 50,000, IT programmers and all that's needed. If you talk about the high skilled, requirements. So it is a huge demand, and the skill shortages that's being seen. And, as you know, AI, IoT, and then security, which, goes along with all of this because of, the risks as you open up to the internet, or on this high cyber security, all of this demand, it's a continuous, spiraling increase. We are talking about everyone needs to be educated as well. So they need to improve the skills, as well as people are required to, actually put in the automation to make it work. And we are all thinking about AI will take away the jobs. It's not, I think, at least certainly in the next decade, it's not going to take away jobs. It's going to increase jobs. Well, in the longer term, yes, certainly there will be reduction in jobs, or rather change in the kind of jobs that people will be working. So just to set the context, I mentioned a couple of acronyms at the beginning, the TITP, which is the Technical Intern Trainee Program, and then the Skilled Worker Program. So Japan has both these models. The technical intern is the entry level. After 3 years, you can convert to the skilled worker. Of course, skilled workers, you can also directly go in, and it's a 10-year program. Now, we have sent people in the manufacturing sector, right? Traditional manufacturing sector, people who worked in, some of the automobile companies in India. So CII and Nihon, we were lucky enough to send the first batch of such technical interns from India to Japan back in 2018. They're just completing their 3-year cycle right now. If you look at it, they're all working in the manufacturing plant in Japan. They are working in a battery production plant. But their job, title says they are machine maintenance people. They are not manufacturing. They are in the assembly line, but it's the robots, the machines that are working. What you need is just to make sure that the machines do not stop, that the automated machine, automated line continues, so that the next line and the next line is getting supplied without any interruption in the production cycle, so that the manufacturing, the supply at the end of the the assembly line is not impacted. So, the job title changes as we move forward, but all the same skills are required. They need to have the manufacturing skills. They need to know what manufacturing specific process that they are managing or underlying. So the skill level also, the skill training also needs to change along with that, with the kind of process that you're working on. Now, I want to highlight a couple of things in the context of the skilling that we do here versus what's required, on the ground. In certain areas, we are seeing that people are studying, but if today in the context of the specified skilled workers where there will be a test required to go in, I think I'm not sure if Gulf has that mechanism, but Singapore certainly has that mechanism. A lot of the construction workers do have to take a test before they are certified and they are allowed to get their visas to go to Singapore. Japan is, making it as a mandatory for almost all of the specified skills that they would be taking in. So our skills ecosystem in India has to match to that. Of course, I mentioned about the language skill, which is the biggest gap. I know our friend Navis and these people have been doing language trainings for a long time. But if at any point in time you look at the available number of people who already have the language, very, very limited. Whereas I think Professor Rajan mentioned very clearly that so many people went to the Gulf. The reason why more and more Kerala people are going to Gulf is because there's already Kerala people there. They just invite more and more Kerala people. Likewise, Singapore and Malaysia, Tamil people went there. The Tamil people just bring them. There's no language requirement. There's no language. Does not come as a impediment, in terms of bringing in those workers and then getting them to be absorbed in the work. Today in Japan, unless these guys are good in Japanese,
Mr. Narayanan, you have muted yourself. You could unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sorry, please go ahead.
Okay, that was a bit of a surprise. I didn't touch anything. So I don't know where I lost. So, in the context of Professor Rajan's point about Malayalis going to Gulf, I think it's because Malayalis are already there, so they started going. Likewise, in Malaysia and Singapore, more and more Tamilians went. There is no impediment there to getting those, people absorbed. Whereas I think to Japan, unless you learn the language and you're good, it's very difficult to go there, and to increase the volume, we need more Indians in this context. Right? Again, go back to the IT migration that I was part of. We went there, we pulled in more Indians, from what was 2,000 or, let's say 2,000 to 3,000 Indians. Now today it's around 35,000 Indians that are there, and almost all of them in IT. The expansion happened in IT, right? Similarly, in the semi-skilled space, we need more Indians to go there. It'll take 3-5 years. Then, they can start absorbing more and more Indians. We are already seeing that happening with some of our technical interns getting converted to specified skilled very soon. And I'm proud to say that, the first batch of people that I sent is from South India, is from Tirunelveli, like down south. We took the people, we trained them. They were able to pick up language very, very well, very quickly. So I think the South Indian language, the South Indian people generally have a quick attachment towards picking up the languages. So we can easily train them in Japanese. And I am also proud to say that many of them may not speak English well, but they did pick up Japanese well, and they are very conversant in Japanese, right? So they feel somehow comfortable. They might feel shy speaking in English, but they'll certainly not feel shy speaking in their Japanese. That's the kind of capability that we have in this region. Now, if we can get the technical skill to the level and get them trained in their technical skills to be able to write the tests, right? Which is another problem for the the skilled worker category in Japan. If you can prepare, then I think there is certainly a huge possibility for sending more of these people to Japan. Of course, as I said, like the specific skills requires a lot of ability to be able to pass the test. Not very tough tests, but these are all areas. I will leave Rajkumar to talk about the nursing, nurse care, which they are expert at. We are working on manufacturing. We are working in automobile mechanics. We are working in agriculture. So these areas, the tests are, not complex Japanese, simple Japanese. However, I think people have to be trained. So the skills ecosystem needs to be able to also allow for technical skills, once it's done, to help them, pass that exam in a language, in a Japanese language, unless, the government is able to push Japanese to allow the test to happen in English, right? Which would be a great advantage, or English, or even Hindi for that matter. If that's such sort of a thing happens, certainly many of them can pass the test and qualify themselves. However, I think, we need to get that skills to a level where they will feel comfortable. I mean, in the day-to-day language, day-to-day survival, they'll be able to survive better there. And that's the real volume increase that we have to put through in India. And today, we are having a lot of hurdles there that we need to clear, including, like, for example, how much tests are happening. How many people can we, can first and foremost, how many people can appear for the test? Based on that, more tests will be conducted. But unless we increase the volume, the tests will not even come here. So then, we are in a chicken and egg situation. But then, how do we increase the volume over a period of time? All of us have to collect together and then, make sure there is enough people that we can put in, and then create that basic momentum. Once the momentum is there, then I think, the momentum will drive itself. Similar to what IT saw from 3,000 to 35,000, I'm sure, we would see much, much more in the semi-skilled migration in a period of time.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think I stop at that, Shabari, because I think it'd be better if you take questions later on.
Yes. And things based on what you have just suggested as well. There are, when you were talking about the tests that, for instance, Singapore does, where you would have to take those tests before you go into Singapore to work, whether particularly in the construction sector, let's say. I know that these similar processes are also now coming up very strongly in the Gulf region. This is something that the employers in the Gulf countries are now insisting on. And COVID has also had a big role to play in these kinds of perhaps mindset changes and attitude changes, simply because they don't want to take a chance anymore. They don't want to necessarily be, to use the wrong word here, for the employers to be burdened with workers who don't necessarily have the right skills. So in that context, I think you're absolutely right. No, this has been fantastic. Thank you very much. Really appreciate all this background. You really are somebody who, we should come back more to, particularly on the issue of technology. And maybe, Krishnan sir, maybe it was a good thing you went to Japan and not to the United States, because there certainly is a reason why you make, let's say, much more appearances in terms of your expertise here. And what you bring to the table. So thank you very much. Well, great. This takes me to our next speaker, Mr. Rajkumar. And Mr. Rajkumar, again, I'm not going to necessarily introduce you. It's been done. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. But if there was a specific area, I mean, Krishnan sir spoke about now the importance of language, for instance, which you focus on. So it'd be good to hear from you along those lines, where we know that language is an important component of skilling. This is certainly not my father's malum nahi kind of a situation. It's very different, right? So I'd be curious to know from you along those lines. But also, let's talk about, because when you go into language, you're touching on the human in a way that is so identity focused, isn't it? So in that kind of a context, what is the level of awareness that you see amongst migrants? For instance, Nepali migrants who go to Korea can go only through a specific employment permit system, and this system requires them to learn Korean. And it's actually one that they've been very successful in navigating. I think this is also applicable to Indians and others from South Asia going to Korea. But that's specifically in the context of language, but it also means that there is a lot of cultural awareness that is given to them. So I'm curious to know what kind of awareness is also specifically available in the different training institutions itself, and your broader perspectives. Mr. Rajkumar, over to you. Your time starts now.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Surabhi and the ICM team for organizing this meeting. And I would also like to thank Sabri for giving me an easier topic to talk. So I was very concerned about what topic you're going to give me. And I also would like to thank everyone in the panel. And of course, Krishnan, he made a lot of things easier for me. So it's good that I am in number 3. So thank you, Krishnan, once again. And yeah, I think language, I think that is the topic that I may have to cover, is what I feel. Yes, when we talk about Japan, or when we talk about any country, I think language is going to be a very key factor. And even Mr. Rajan, he explained about making India as a skill capital. So I think if we would like to send more and more people out of our country, I think language is going to be one very big criteria. Of course, in the 90s, I think IT was very popular. Yes, we all know that today we are number 1, maybe in IT, we can say that. I think one reason is because we were able to speak English. I think that is also one reason. I think if we would have done all our engineering in some other language, maybe even we had a lot of skills, communicating or sharing their skills to a global needs a language. So I think English also was one reason to really make IT as one of our major strength for the Indian manpower. Now, when it comes to Japan, or maybe even a lot of Asian countries, I think, yes, Japan needs skills, but it also needs a language. Because if you can't communicate what skills you possess, there is no use in having that basic skills. And as even Krishnan mentioned, and even Rajan, of course, Sabri, I think, especially in Japan, language is not just language. It is language and culture. I think that's a very important aspect that we should not forget. Now, yes, Krishnan also mentioned about the declining in population and the need for more foreign skilled resources. I think Japan has a problem called 20-25-year problem, like how we had a Y2K problem. I think Y2K problem was one turning point for our IT industry. Many of them would have forgotten. But people were thinking it will crash, the system will not grow, continue, the banks will not work. I think that was a turning point. And Japan is having a similar problem, year 2025 problem. Now, year 2025 problem is, that is the year when more number of people turn 65 years old. That means 65 years back, many babies were born. Maybe that was a baby boom or something. So all these babies are getting 65 years old in 2025. And in 2035, they will become 75. You know, Japan has a very, very long life average age. So people easily cross, I think I don't exactly remember the average age now. I think it's more 78 or 79. So I think 2035 will be a very serious problem where all these babies are going to turn 75. So this is what is the level of situation back in Japan. But one thing is, this is only the beginning. Now, many countries are going to follow the same thing. And it is also going to happen to China because they adopted a one-child policy. So in between, there are a lot of other countries like Germany, France. Everybody is going to follow the same thing. And Japan is going to lead the situation of declining population. Now, which is the country which can supply? I think we are the only one now. I think all the countries need us. And yes, for that, we need the language skills, at least when it comes to blue collar or even white collar. I think language skill is something that we should polish ourselves. And again, we have a strength there. I think we have a strength telling that we have more population and young people especially, so that we can supply to all these countries which are having going to have a decline, population decline. One more strength in languages, we are the only one, maybe we can speak multiple languages. I think most of us here can speak maybe 3 or 4. It doesn't matter speaking one more language called Japanese, that's all. That's how we take it. But it's a very big thing, especially Japanese are very astonished when somebody tells, I can speak Tamil, Telugu or Malayalam or Hindi. It's very astonishing. Oh, you can speak these many languages. So I think we have basically a DNA to adapt a language. And as Krishnan rightly said, even English, yes, maybe the people whom Krishnan sent, he trained them in Japanese and sent them. Maybe if he had trained them in English, they could have adapted it. So I think basically we have the capability, we have a DNA. Just imagine a driver in Bangalore can speak Hindi, he can speak Telugu, he has not gone even to a school. So I think we have by DNA the language capability. All we need should be thought properly. And as Krishnan rightly said, we took a challenge. As I said to you, Japan is having a declining population. And we thought that which is the area where the real language skills are required. And we realized that it is going to be nursing care, because people have to talk to very, very elderly people. So they need proper Japanese, because most of the elderly people cannot speak any other language other than Japanese. So we trained them, we trained the Indian nurses in Japanese, and we have sent them. So that is what we did it. And astonishingly, because they are all nurses, so they possess the background. And as Rajan also mentioned, I think we have one area is nurses. We have especially South India, and maybe even the other part of India also. So they have the functionality, and we train them in the language. And astonishingly, we were able to train them just in 6 months. Actually, language, we train them only in 5 months. Other countries takes 1.5 years to do the same level of training. Okay. Now, yes, Japanese means immediately we only think about the script and it looks like a dream. But one astonishing thing is Japanese grammar is exactly similar to most of the Indian languages grammar. So maybe script is difficult, but speaking, I think we will be the best to speak when compared to any other foreigner. And it's exactly the same. Not like English. English has a different grammar, but like any of our South Indian languages, or even the other Indian languages, of course, most of the Indian languages, the grammar is exactly the same. So we can speak or converse more better than any other foreigner. Now, coming to culture, that is very important. This is the place where we may have a challenge for Japan. We need to really make sure that they have the skill, they have the language, but they need to take it in a proper way so that it is reachable to the Japanese. So that is going to be very important, and we should really train them. As you all know, Japanese has a different level of going, you know. You need to go to somebody like this, where you sit is confirmed. If you go to a meeting room, seeing a meeting room, you will know who is the senior, who is the junior, who is the manager. If you get into a taxi, you know who should get in, who should get out. See, these are all micro level of things. Of course, it is not expected, but if we can do that, if we can train them, so especially Japan, if we can be successful in training language and culture in Japan and maybe followed by Germany, maybe we can go to any country. Maybe it's like telling that if you can drive in India, you can drive in any country, something like that. I don't know. So basically, I feel that culture is a very important aspect and we need to train them. And astonishingly, again, as our Krishnan said, our people are they are good followers. See, you see in Singapore or you see even in Malaysia, people don't throw something out, they follow. But maybe in India, they follow different things. So we are good followers. So Japan makes them to follow because there's a system, everybody does it, people just do it. We are very good in doing it. In India, if somebody stands in a green signal, everybody will stand. Somebody skips red, everybody will skip red. So we are used to doing it. Just follow what people do. So if we have a good system, maybe people follow. That is culture. So if we can give them a basic culture, and when they land in this environment, I think they can really adapt to that culture. But we need to provide them some basic knowledge on why culture and the sort of business manner is required. I'm not sure whether I've crossed my time. Sharabi, should I continue, or Sharabi, should I stop here?
Sir, why don't we come back to you in the discussions? Because I'm sure there are quite a few things that you have said here now that will certainly come back.
So I will stop here and I give it back to you, Shabari. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Rajkumar sir. Really appreciate it. Now, here's the thing. I mean, listening to you talk about, who is senior and who is not senior. I will not speak about India or let's say what it is like, but I'll tell you within my own organization, the UN is pretty hierarchical. You know, there's a very clear perspective of who is manager. If you have if you're sharing the office with somebody, then you're most probably lower level. But if your office is a single office in the corridor, then that means you are mid-level. If your office is by itself in a corner, that means you're director. And if your office is on the topmost floor, that means you're director general. So very clearly, we know these differences, right? And I'm so glad you bring it up because that affects the way we work. And that part of this is not just cultural identity, this is organizational cultural identity. And I suppose in Japan, it would be so much more stronger than in most other parts of the world. Very clearly where there is an organizational discipline around it. But that brings me to our final panelist here. And the final panelist is Ms. Bharti. Really happy to have you here, Ms. Bharti, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. But Ms. Bharti, now I want to go down to the state level. You know, I remember a long time back when I was visiting Delhi, an expert told me, Shabri, today's India is no more about the A, B, C, Ds. And I asked him what he meant. This was about 10 years back. He said A for Aya, B for Butler, C for Chaprasi, and D for driver. Today's India is about the engineers, the doctors, the lawyers, the corporate secretaries, the accountants, and the highly skilled professionals. And this is the kind of perspective he gave me. And I was really, let's say to an extent also in awe of the fact that the conversation had changed so much. I then immediately afterwards went to a southern Indian state. I won't necessarily say which one. And while there, I had the state government representatives who were telling me, Shabri, can you help us figure out how to set up a vocational center or a training center for domestic workers? And I saw that there was this big disparity. And the domestic worker is the A of the ABCD, the Ayas. or the chaprasis or the drivers, and so the butlers, and this really is a stark difference. There is perspectives from states, which is really truly India being the sum of its parts. It's important for us to hear, and I think that's really where I want to touch, Ms. Bharti, from your side. Specifically now, what is the involvement of state governments? What can they do to enhance the skilling ecosystem? We're talking about southern states, so please, Telangana is certainly one example, but I'd like to hear from you on the broader southern perspective as well. Ms. Bharti, your time starts now.
Thank you so much. What you asked is very interesting one, because from Hyderabad, I can say it's like a mini India. Are you able to hear me? Am I audible? Okay. We have the best of the ones, like we send the highly professional people to US, Australia and all. And as you said, we also send a lot of domestic mates also from southern states. We have they say that southern states have the advantage of English. We are supposed to be good at that. And also the latest trends, that is the IT sector. And in Hyderabad, after Bangalore, we have a lot of IT industries and a lot of training institutes which give training in artificial intelligence, computing, cloud computing, and so many other things. But the problem is there is a lot of disparity, as you have said. We have the best of the institutions. At the same time, there are also people who are really very low skilled who go to Gulf countries. As Professor Rajan has said, there is still that Gulf fixation which is going on. But we are also looking at the part where we can send people to other countries. And as a government recruitment agency, I get a lot of people, they call me and they ask me, are you having any vacancies for English countries? When I first got this English countries, they mean other than the Gulf countries. Any country which speaks English. They mean not only US, Europe also, they have that concept that will you send us to English countries? So then I start telling, okay, no, in Europe you have other languages and all, but the knowledge about Japan is very little. They think about Singapore, they go to Malaysia, but again about Japan, the knowledge is very less. What I would like to tell is that there are two things we can work on it. One is already the existing skills. We are good at English. So let us look at the opportunities where they take our healthcare sectors, especially in countries like UK. We got in 2020 requirement from the European UK government, NHS. They said that they would like to recruit a lot of nurses because of Brexit. Many Portuguese nurses are leaving, it seems. And they would like to start from Southern India because for them, Southern India is synonymous with the nurses. But they choose Hyderabad as a center and they decided to give training online by the British Council. They selected some candidates and they gave 3 months online training. But for 13 candidates they gave and they paid the fee for IELTS, that is testing for English language, which is a tough test, but it is a test which they have to clear with 7 band. And they started in the month of February 2020. And by the time it was over, it was COVID peak time again, but still as it was online, nurses could do and they tried and they wrote the exam, but almost all of them got 6.5 band. It was very disheartening, but at least we knew where we were standing. 7 band was what they were looking for, these people completed near 6.5. But they took some time again to write because the examination fee part is more. As a government agency, we can ask only the candidates to pay, and the amount was on higher side. It was 14,000 per candidate. So they were all the nurses who were working in private hospitals and all. So they said they'll take some time and then they'll appear again. So that was one attempt we made where we thought that we had advantage, but still we need some training, some part of coaching for a few months. So that is the nursing part. When we are talking about the new languages, new skills, Japan is again a very interesting country, but the language is absolutely unknown for everyone. So if we can have some sort of online programs with NSDC, taking the help of people like Mr. Krishnan, who are already aware of the things that are there. So can we make some sort of modules and then have really these classes where it will really help them, so that this gap between people who are going with really good skills and settling in Western countries, and there are also people who are ready to go, they're interested, they're ready to go, but the point is about this language skills which can be given. Hyderabad has very good institutions. We have EFLU also, that is the English and Foreign Languages University, which gives graduate and postgraduate degrees in Japanese. So we can collaborate with them with the help of NSDC and take the people who have the practical experience, like Mr. Krishnan has, and then formulate a module, develop something, and then work on it and then do it. It will be really, really helpful. It is not that people are not ready to go to new countries. It is because they don't know whom to approach and where the standardized training is given. The certification part is also very important. In Singapore, there is a BCA, that is Building Construction Authority, which gives a certificate which is accepted by Singapore. If Japan is also having something like that, we can make it familiar, we can make it a part of our advertisement and say that, yes, these are the advantages going to this country, but you must pass these things. This is something I think we can work out. Yes, Mr. Nair?
What I must say, Bharti ma'am, if there is one way of being short, succinct, and sweet, may it be Nagabharati. Really, I think you really nicely captured those elements in almost. I've noted down about 8 to 9 points, and those were the 8 to 9 points that you have now really captured this entire Southern perspective on, and particularly from a state level. I'm thinking of English countries, and that will stay with me. And I wonder, and I'm also going back to what Rajkumar sir said in reference to what Krishnan said with regards to perhaps the fact that English training would have helped them to adapt more in Japan. I'm curious to know how these things will necessarily fit in. But I've noted that Professor Rajan has to leave in about 10 minutes time. So I really want to get into the discussions. Thank you very much to all the 4 panelists for a very interesting set of comments, inputs, and thoughts from your sides. In fact, there have been so many questions. I don't know if you noticed, but during this period, I actually got cut off from the laptop. I'm speaking to you with my headphones connected to a laptop. I got cut off while Mr. Krishnan was speaking. I had to connect again within about a minute through my phone. And then when my phone got connected and my internet connection came back for my laptop, I went back to my laptop because I could go through the questions. But the point I'm trying to make is this: I am still, as a policy maker or working on policy issues, struggling with technology. And this is, it really is not necessarily focused on generations or not necessarily focused on any of those. There's a reason why I quit engineering at one point in time and went on to do international relations. But nevertheless, here's me coming back to some of the questions that the panelists have raised. And I'm going to, there are quite a few. In fact, I think it was Professor Vibha Arora who says here that, this panel, there is not enough time. There really requires a whole range of conversations on this. And what I understand, Professor Arora, is, and I can see you, so thanks so much for turning your video on. What I understand is that this is just one of 4 discussions that MEA and ICM will be organizing. This is the Southern perspective, and we'll of course have the other regions as well. So coming into some of these questions that were raised, the one that stands out to me, and I think this specifically came from one of our participants who I don't necessarily see on the screen here. Maybe I could address this to both Mr. Krishnan and to Mr. Rajkumar. And Rajan sir, there is one question for you as well. To Mr. Krishnan and to Mr. Rajkumar, here's the question was about Japan's bureaucracy. And we all know that at the end of the day, we can say what we want about skills and migration and skilling and employability, which also I read in one of the comments. At the end of the day, the institutions have a big role to play. And here it says, Japan's bureaucracy has proven to be very slow in implementing the quote-unquote fast visas for construction, agriculture, nursing, etc. Only several hundred visas were processed in the first 12 months of the current program. What is to say that will change? So let me broaden that questions onto institutions. The government perspectives, the government institutions in terms of how they necessarily react to the situation. Now, let's say the MOC itself, going further on from the MOC, how will the Japanese government, there is a strong will from the side of both the governments to implement that MOC, but how will the Japanese government, sitting there, what do you think is the experience in terms of how they will go about it? And then to Professor Rajan. Professor Rajan, the point that was made, this was more a statement, and I'd be interested to hear you also open it up into those advantages that I was talking right at the beginning. It says, given Europe's aging population and need for large number of workers in health sector, construction, and IT, even in small countries like in the Scandinavian countries, the Nordic countries, is there any specific skilling programs to match them and promote mobility, as Professor Rajan pointed out? So let's moving away from the Gulf, Professor Rajan. But again, if we were to move away from the Gulf, which part within Europe? Which part within Europe? Are we looking Scandinavia? Are we looking at UK, the English speaking? Are we looking at Western Europe? Are we now looking at the new Eastern European countries? There is a whole conversation about Romania, Poland, Czech Republic, Croatia, people going there now from our side of things. So I'm curious to know from that angle, and this nicely links in. So over to both all three panelists, and then Ms. Bharti, I'll come back to you with some questions that are also specifically addressed for you. Krishnan sir, do you want to go first?
Thanks, Shabri. So the question on bureaucracy and, it's been slow. Actually, I would say it's this one, in my view, is not the question of bureaucracy. In fact, it's a bureaucracy which is going too far ahead. So what's happening is I think the government is expecting the shortage that, India has to fill. So there is a little bit of work that's going ahead in India in terms of, expanding and, pushing from India. Whereas I think the businesses that at the end of the day have to really take in the people, right? Whether it's the construction sector or the, the other one that was mentioned about, right? I think the demand, we need to raise the demand. Similar to what Ms. Bharti was saying, in India, the awareness is not there about Japan at the student level, at the individual labor level in terms of opportunities in Japan. Similarly, in Japan, I think the companies are still not very clear about India as a potential source for labor. They look at IT. Today, IT is well established. Indians is equal to IT is well known amongst, across the board in Japan. Whereas I think, Indians for the labor sector, in construction, for example, is not there. Secondly, I think another deterrent, which I think we need to change, is also, we are not a chopstick nation, right? So in other words, Indians are not known for, I think we do follow, but the fact that we follow is not very well known. India is known, still a little bit of a rowdy image, if you will, right? They ask questions, they want to challenge, they want to know, they want to do things differently, they want to use the brain too soon. So it's a little bit of that. Whereas I think in Japan, it's a process that's set. You follow the process and don't ask any question why we have to follow the process. Even a Kaizen works, it has to go back to the planning department. Planning department has to implement the process before process can be implemented. That's how the Kaizen, circle also works. So there is this demand that we need to generate. We need to make India as a potential source of labor known at the individual business level. So there is a bit of promotion that's required, and I'm sure, ICM is very much aware, and the MEA is very much aware of some of this promotion that we need to do in the Japan side also to allow, so like Ms. Bharti said, we have to promote this to the Indian workers, that there is an opportunity in Japan so that they start preparing themselves. We need to promote there. Then the migration will go fast. I think, we are in that early stage. So we are feeling that, okay, I can send thousands of construction laborers like we did for Gulf or Singapore. Therefore, I can send. But the speed is not there because, the demand is not yet picked up. It will pick up steam. And once it picks up, we'll be struggling to supply because we then have the training and other things that we need to do for the initial. Even I am having the same problem. We have hundreds of people, stuck because of COVID, but the demand has not come. So I can pick up 100 people and train, no problem. But can I pick up 1,000 people and train, how much more effort I have to put in? That's the challenge, but that's a future challenge. It's just that we are in this interim period is what I would say.
No, thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Krishnan sir. This is thanks for putting that in context. The fact that we are not a chopstick nation. Before I come to Rajkumar, so just want to check if Professor Rajan is still here. Surabhi, has Professor Rajan left already? No, Rajan sir, over to you. I know you need to leave, so yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think I just want to make, I saw some of the, chat boxes and I'm reading everything. I just want to make 2-3 points. I think one is that I think we don't need to even concentrate on only Japan. Japan, we are talking about hundreds, man. We are talking about thousands and probably lakhs to be migrated. So we should go to beyond, as I said earlier, there are 100 plus countries. That is something important. I think, and the language barrier, I don't think it's not a barrier because I'm seeing people who come from Northeast coming to Kerala and speaking the language better than me. I'm living in Kerala for 30 years. They speak good Malayalam. So I think if required, they will pick it up. I don't think that should be so much because it's basically skills. This should be additional qualification language. I think the skills is very important. And I met one of the boy from Tripura. He's only 19 years. He's plucking coconut tree near our house. Then I asked him, he said, I have not seen coconut tree. Now I'm plucking coconut tree in Kerala. And he's speaking Malayalam and he charges less than the local labor. And he does a lot of things other than just plugging the thing. I think, so the language skill, I think it come automatically, but what we need, what I heard, you need a critical minimum in any countries. Like we had a girl for Malaysia, the critical minimum we should create. That is for that you need a strong policy. Finally, I think very important, I think one of the speakers said, declining population declining population is going to happen in at least 70 countries in the next 10 years, not just Japan. And declining population will happen to state where I live. Kerala population will be coming down after 5 years. In 2030, Kerala will what is called like Italy. So you don't need to go anywhere. People can come to Kerala. We may have to have policy too. That's why we are calling them guest workers. So the declining population is going to generate more migration, and India will take at least another 20 to 30 years this demographic dividend. But India also will decline like Japan. But we are having another 30 years. We are going to have a very good time. And it is for us, policymaker and the experts and the researcher to work on how to create viable, what I call them, the India brand, that brand. Indian means there should be a brand. If we can create that brand, India brand. India means this is what India means. We are having Indian passport, like India brand. And that brand we can create through our skill program. I don't think we should limit to only Japan. We can go, and once I try to take my suitcase and leave, I can go to any country in the world. I am a global man. Thank you, Sabi.
Brilliant, Rajan sir. One of the things I will always learn and keep in mind and actually try to act on it is keep a book of quotations by Professor Hridayarajan. Because there is not a time you manage to fail us on capturing. I don't know if you've all noticed, but over the last 1 year, Rajan sir has been in the news so much. He's quoted in every article, whether it's from Washington Post to Times Now in India. In every article he's quoted. And what I usually do now is I just keep a track of all the things that he says because they are all headline capturing. What he says is what the headline has become. But Rajan sir, thank you so much. I really appreciate what you're saying. In fact, you're right. And we need to move out of Japan. But Japan is proving to be a benchmark. So keeping that in mind, I understand the seriousness of using this reference point. Rajkumar sir, I'll come to you and then I will move to Ms. Bharti. What I also want to do is, if we can take an additional couple of minutes, I would like to encourage the audience to turn on their microphone, turn on their videos and actually comment and come in as well. But Rajkumar sir, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Shabri. I think I should continue with the same question that was put to Krishnan. And as Krishnan rightly said, yes. I think if you see the question, it says only several hundred visas were processed in the first 12 months of the current program. I think it's a chicken and egg problem. Only several hundred visas were applied. So that is the reason only several hundred visas were processed. So we are talking about a supply and demand here. And as we discussed, it's about why is there very few people applied to go to Japan? I think we were all talking about the same topic. Japan is a new country. How many of them really know Japan and would like to go and work in Japan? So I think, as Krishna rightly said, promotion is really required. But actually, I think more promotion is required on the Japan side rather than India. As Mr. Rajan rightly said, we are ready to travel to any country. So now, and again, to pointing to Krishnan, as we are not a chopstick nation. So Japan, we need to promote in Japan more about the availability of resources in India. And we also need to make a differentiation. I think we can't simply tell that we can speak the language. Everybody speaks the language. So we may have to make other places of differentiation, right from the government, as even Bharati was mentioning. I think maybe we need to screen people more so that when they go there, they don't get into any issues, they are not returned back. So I think because Japan is such a country, one small issue happens, then it is tagged to everybody. So I think that's very important here. So we make sure that we send at least people who can manage and get used into that environment, and so that we create the same thing, India brand. I think this is important. So I think we need to promote more in Japan so that Japan can give more opportunities, so more people can apply. Then I think more visas will be processed. I think that's what I feel. Thank you.
No, thanks very much, Rajkumar sir. Okay, point well taken. Ms. Bharti, ma'am, I was looking through some of the points here, and I would really encourage everybody to really feel free to turn on your microphones and come in the moment we hear one on a short reflection from Ms. Bharti. But I was looking at this point that was made by Divya Balan here. Divya, thanks so much. I like the way you have concretely and concisely, I think this is also the academic prowess coming to fore here, how you've nicely put these 4 points together. But I'm looking at the last point that you've put where you talk about state-wise approach. State-wise approach is viable with respect to diverse skilling we are talking about. Now, the state-wise approach, Ms. Bharti, I'm wondering, is there a way we can find more peer-to-peer learning between states? Is there a way for us to ensure, because at the end of the day, we are talking about India. For India and the sum of its part to come together, there needs to be a sense of coherence, right? Otherwise, one of the biggest issues we're seeing in the country is this very unequal distribution, unequal geographic development between the north and the south, east and the west, and so on, and even amongst the southern states. So let's say in the southern state context, can we see much more of a state-wise coherent approach, peer-to-peer exchange, peer-to-peer learning in the context of skills? Because at the end of the day, whether you are Kannadiga or Telugu or Tamilian or Malayali, when you end up in the Gulf or in Japan, you are all Indian. And how do we try and incorporate that kind of a perspective?
Yeah, this is also a very interesting thing. I think ever since we started this discussions with the ICM, a lot of interactive sessions are being conducted about different countries, requirements, state-wise and also. But even in states, even in southern states, I find that there are some districts which are migration prone. Not the whole state migrates. Especially in our state like Telangana, there are some districts like Nizamabad, Karimnagar, from where majority, almost we can say 90% of the migrants go to Gulf. So in every state, there is again a specific district-wise migration, wherein we can map which are the places they're going. Like in these Karimnagar and Nizamabad district, a lot of people go for the construction sector. And you see nurses going from metros like Hyderabad, Bangalore, Chennai. And Kerala again has a lot of nurses and domestic maids going over there. And in AP, you can say there are some specific districts from where a lot of female domestic maids go. So in that context, each state can have a specific way where they can say that these are the ones which are having a lot of demand and these are the districts which are migration prone. And among those districts, among those sectors, we can again look into the places where we can go for skilling, like in construction sector, what are the skills which are needed, and also where we must concentrate on two things. Already people who are going on the regular job basis and also people who are coming out, for them we can tell them about the new opportunities, like tell them about the opportunities in Japan and also in Europe, We have a lot of opportunities for nurses in Germany, France, Eastern Europe, as someone has pointed out, the Poland. There is requirement for construction workers, and also a lot of students go to Italy, and there is requirement for agriculture sector also. So they need a lot of people in agriculture. So we have to really familiarize people with these opportunities. Tell them the state these are the opportunities which are existing and the requirements. What is the language requirement? What is the skill requirement which we need?
No, thanks so much, Ms. Bharati. Okay, with those reflections, Surabhi, I'm going to take your kind permission and indulgence, because there are so many participants here, and there's a whole range of questions which I will never be able to, fully do service to. If you all have access to your chat box, please look at this one chat message which really caught my attention, and that is the one from Professor Vibha Arora, where she starts off by talking about skills are not the same as employability. In fact, Professor Arora then goes on to then also talk about the human-centered approach itself and sociological studies and a whole range of other things that she points out too. So maybe if we can go in that order, I will request Professor Arora to say, take a minute, bring in some of your reflections, and then from there on, it's anybody's game. So we'll do 5 minutes of reflections from the side of the audience. Professor Arora, if you're still there.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, madam.
Okay, I tried to put in a lot of my thoughts in the chat box itself, because I wasn't sure that we would get time to speak up and with such a great distinguished panel before us. The point that I want to emphasize is the fact that our higher education institutions themselves have to incorporate that strategy of training manpower, both not just within India, but for multinational companies and also for international migration. It has to be very much part of our higher education strategy itself, where it's not just going to be merely language, but also cultural adaptation skills, which are very, what we call social capital, to use Bourdieu's term, are going to be very essential for creating a brand India. You know, a lot of times if you talk to people, when you go abroad, when you talk to people who've come back, remember it's a cyclical period in a individual's age. You know, there's a period in which they're comfortable being a global worker, and there's an age in which they want to be back in their own country after having earned money or certain part of their family life. And this also will differ for men and for women. So we should not look upon international migration in isolation, but look upon them and how it impacts both nationally, their families, the individuals, not just merely as laboring bodies with certain skill sets which are desirable in an international context, but as humans who have to adapt to a very radically different circumstance, but they're not going to be treated as citizens. As migrant laborers, they do not enjoy the same kind of human rights which they would enjoy if they were within their own country. There's a sense of differential citizenship. We have heard of these horror stories of domestic workers and other people whose passports were taken by their employers. And there's adequate amount of sociological studies of certain kinds of skilled workers, nurses in particular, and a lot of them have gone from Kerala, on how their family life has got impacted. And a lot of times the migration is not merely, from what I can see the patterns, it's sometimes the Gulf is merely a stepping stone for migration to other countries. So international migration itself needs to be kind of disaggregated in people's own life cycles and career tracks. People may first go to Gulf, and from there they may actually want to settle down or be based in an English-speaking world later. I think
thank you so much, Professor. Yeah, no, thanks so much, Professor Arora. I fully, recognize. I think, you can have all the skills in the world you want to, but if you're not going to be treated in the same way as a national worker is, then no matter what you do, it's a whole range of other conversations. And this is where the ILO impresses on policymakers to look at it from the context of labor standards as well. The fact that migrants at the end of the day are not commodities. They're not just people you can export along those lines. Right. Anybody else who would like to quickly take the floor and give their reflections? I'm also very capable of that. Yes, I heard somebody and I saw a hand raised. So I will go with the hearing first. That would be, yes, Mr. Chakradhar. I'm so sorry. I don't know who is speaking to me. Please go ahead.
I'm Chakradhar over here, and I'm from Hyderabad.
Okay.
We are an NSDC training partners in the area of centralized air.
The voice is not audible.
Mr. Chakradhar, if you could kindly. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I will repeat it. Okay.
No, it's fine.
So, yeah, fine. So, we are from Dhanush Engineering Services India Private Limited, approved training partner of NSDC. We work in the area of centralized air conditioning, electrical and plumbing services. So, we as I said, it was said that most of the people are going to Gulf. So just I wanted to check, in this segment, there are many countries which have been named over here. Why is that Russia or the past USSR not being put into this? Because there are, in the past, when we were training people on oil and gas, so there were people who are coming from Ukraine to the center and got trained, the Ukraine citizens. And when we talk about Russia, Japan, its number is limited as been put in discussion. So just I wanted to know from you that Russia or the old USSR, if you learn only Russian, will that cater us to go into different countries of the USSR? That's my point.
Right. So Japanese to Russian. I'm curious to know how this will come in. I saw Nauzad had raised his hand from ICMPD, and Nauzad, the European perspective.
Thank you, Shabri. I hope everyone can hear me. I just wanted to share some, perhaps just congratulating so much of the work that ICM has been doing with the Ministry of External Affairs, ICMPD, and ILO on looking at other aspects of one's arrival in a new country of destination. Because indeed, skills matching is a key reflection to undertake when deciding whether one needs to migrate to Europe. Language is another, but also integration. And we have done a lot with ICM and ILO's help, and also collaborating with European member states and better understanding what are the integration challenges that Indians are facing when they come to Europe. Skills matching, skills recognition, making sure that one can do the job that they are doing is obviously very important, and ILO leads in that department. But looking also at, for example, how are they able to better acclimatize themselves to the culture in which they are finding themselves? How is housing handled? How is one's food and other aspects of life, that social integration, voting rights? Also recognizing the importance that Indians are making in spite of the underutilization of their skills. So, for example, when one thinks about the Indian contributions that we are making to Italy's fantastic cheeses that we all enjoy, the Grana Padano cheese, the Parmesan cheese, the mozzarella cheese, these are all made by second and third generation Punjabi farmers today. They are not made by Italian hands anymore. We should call them Indian cheeses, frankly speaking. Secondly, I think it's really important to underline the aspect that when you are reflecting on why aren't we talking about Europe, Europe is hearing this. Europe is already looking at the possibility of talent partnerships across the world. Europe is already looking at how to understand its skills needs versus the aging economy and the aging population. And I personally think that a lot is being done in this area. ILO, for example, has looked at entrepreneurship with us within the project that we are supporting, the European CAM Dialogue project. We've also looked at, for example, how can we better help student mobility? Because yes, one way to migrate to Europe is to come via a job, but most often what tends to happen is that the young youth of Indian origin come through student educative opportunities. Then once they've graduated here in Europe, have decided to stay over. And Europe is making itself more attractive. Europe understands that it is in a losing battle with America, Australia, New Zealand, the GCC on the best and brightest, and India offers an opportunity to do that. So I just wanted to, of course, congratulate everyone who has spoken. Thank you for your moderation and your ability to move us forward, but also highlight some of the good work that ICM and MEA has been doing with us.
Thank you very much, Nauzad. In fact, when you said best and brightest, I was looking at you as you were saying it. Also keeping in mind Nauzad Hodiwala is I think a Canadian national, Nauzad, of Indian origin, living in Europe, married to a European with 2 lovely kids. I hear what you're talking about. That is the way things have to change. And there are quite a few comments on student mobility as well. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I do not want to forget that somebody did speak into my ears. Would you like to take the floor?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Mr. Jayachandran, yes, of course. Please.
I am representing Center for Diaspora Studies at University of Kerala.
Go ahead, Mr. Jayachandran. Yes, go ahead. We can hear you.
I think we have met 2 years back when you attended an international conference on migration here. I'm very happy to see you on screen. A point I have to raise is, as Professor Vibha Arora pointed out, the Indian diaspora has been facing a different type of exclusions in the destination countries. It is because of the main reason that most of the migrant laborers are working in the common sector, which is not conceived by the destination as the essential services. Especially according to the findings of our own study based on social exclusion, the people who are engaged in the lower profile jobs are experiencing more social exclusions. So my question is, the government machinery can easily monitor the global demand of labor supply, as well as the Indian population have the highest number of human resource. So what can we do with through mobilizing the government machinery to bridge the gap between the demand and supply of labor, or skill demand and supply?
Okay, what can the government do specifically? And I would be interested to hear from the existing panelists in their final reflections on this. I think that's a good way to also have literally 30 seconds for the 3 remaining panelists, because it is important to conclude with all the reflections that they've heard from you, the audience, and I wish we could go on. Like Professor Arora said, this is not going to end here. But Krishnan sir, Ms. Rajkumar and Ms. Nagabharati. In fact, if I can go the other way around and give it first to Ms. Bharti, Madam, your final remarks, also looking at state machinery and what needs to be done based on Mr. Jayachandran's last question. Go ahead.
Yeah, as he had said, it is about the demand and supply. Here again, we have to tell the people that jobs in Gulf, especially for people who are really not having higher qualifications, need not be limited only to domestic maids. They can also be caretakers. They can also be some technicians wherein they can learn these things. Let us not look at only one point. Why only domestic maids? It need not be that. It is it is our responsibility to tell them that there are other opportunities, and also tell them about the institutions which can give their training for this. So this is something we have to do, which will help in expanding our base, the migrants' base, so that people with higher education, they can go anywhere. But that need not be the case. Even with lower education levels, the skills are something which we can look into it. And here, IT skills also be imparted. For simple IT skills, I don't think they need higher education and all that. Only we need is a little bit of planning and proper institutions which give the training. Thank you.
Right. Thanks so much, Ms. Bharti. If I may go to Rajkumar sir now.
Yeah, I think I may have understood the question a little bit different. I'm not sure on that, but we talked about 2 points. Maybe one is the supply and demand, and one more is the social exclusion happening in the lower category of people. Coming to supply and demand, I think I already talked about it. yes, there should be a sort of promotion on both sides to create a demand. Especially again, since I come from a Japanese background, so I think in case of Japan, the issue is we need to create a sort of promotion back in Japan. And maybe this is a fact, this may not be the fact for other countries. Maybe for the other countries, we may have to do more promotion back in India so that they can find a different destination country. Now, coming to social exclusion, I think this is a very nice point. There are a lot of such situations even in Japan because it's very difficult to socialize easily even in Japan. Again, this goes back to the language and the culture. And there are a lot of incidents where people feel lonely, they are feeling isolated. People are treated well, but they are not trying to get involved into the society. I think this creates them a sort of, they come, they do their work, they go back, they stay, they want to save money, send back to India. So this, I think this is what I feel is a major reason for at least some incidents happening in Japan. I'm not sure about other countries where this sort of incidents are happening is because people don't get socialized, and we may have to do this sort of maybe, I don't know, maybe a training or a manner, or maybe asking them to stray a little bit, become more socialized with what is happening, especially Japan. Japan also is insisting on the receiving organizations to make sure that the people whom they recruit or get into the society. It's a very compulsory one law that it's a rule. Sorry, it's not a law. It's a rule that is made very clearly to the receiving organization that they should allow or they should create opportunities to socialize people. I think this is a very good important point that was pointed out, and I think we need to make sure that we teach them. I don't know whether we should train them, at least to make sure that they can socialize by providing them the basic skills and culture, so it's easy for them to socialize in a different environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rajkumar sir, and Mr. Krishna.
Yeah, so what I would like to do is come back to the southern states, which was the focus of today's meeting. If I may, talk a bit, on a free format, right? I think it's important. I mean, we already said that there's a bit of promotion required. It's not just Japan; it's also the European and other countries. They are looking for skills. They are looking for some kind of filtering before they want to take people. They don't want to just allow anybody to sort of migrate. So from a skill standpoint, the states, similar to how states have, promoted for investment, I think the states can also start thinking of promoting their skills, their capabilities. And, maybe there is some kind of a, Kerala can obviously, nursing, or healthcare is a likewise, AP, Telangana, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka can all specifically take some things and attract certain countries. And it's similar to investments, similar to how, at the India level, we are talking about India as a skills capital. Each state can say that, these are the skills that are available in those states. And that becomes a bit of a promotion back to the country through their, whatever confederations we have back into the country. And that kind of reverse creates knowledge that, oh, if I want these skills, I mean, construction, for example, maybe I go to this state or, and southern states have really been good. I mean, if you look at, specifically for Japan, the investment from Japan has been very heavily into the southern states. And every one of the states have a good share. And similarly, you can promote the skills back to the country. So I think skills training at the lower level and skills promotion back to foreign countries could drive the demand that we are all waiting for. I mean, for us who are in the system also, creating the demand, we are kind of wondering how to really create the momentum. And, I think there was a question before on Russia. I want to also touch that. There is already some demand that's coming from Russia, and we are all being asked from time to time, whether there is anybody. Of course, like it requires somebody to have a focus because, this issue of social issues, it requires for us to provide the help. While I think, the counterparts in those countries can always help, we all need to help. We all need to guide our own people. I mean, although the Indians today in the US are, getting into the government, but that's taken so many years, right? It required so much of support in the early years. And that's what we need to give to the people that are traveling. So we need to have focus in those countries. And then that will help us, to pick up. But back to my earlier point, I think the states can start focusing on some skills promotion from their side to these countries. That would then attract the demand to also flow in.
Right. Thanks so much, Krishnan sir. Really appreciate this. Fantastic panel. Thank you so much. I've learned myself a lot. I've exceeded by 15 minutes. Unfortunately, the moderator was perhaps a little off here by 15 minutes. My apologies to Surabhi and team here. But I have to mention this because there has been such an interesting set of questions and discussions. We had received in the chat messages, I noticed the following names, apart from Professor Vibha Arora and Divya Balan. I noticed comments from Binita Thampi, Philip Jackson, somebody from Namani G&G Skills, Mohammad Faustin, Kuntal Kar, Jay Chandran MG, of course, who spoke, Mr. Bhagwan Singh, I think it is Niranjana, Dr. Sanjay, Bhaskar, and the others. So thank you all for participating. Surabhi, back to you as the host.
Shabri, just to intervene if I can, I'm Kuntal speaking. Just
Go
a moment.
Ahead. Go ahead. Now
Just
that
a
you've
moment,
taken
for
the
a
floor,
minute.
Surabhi, now that, yeah,
you.
go ahead.
No, I am from ASSOCHAM, and I thank you as well as a moderator along with the panelists. But my question is very, which I have written in the chat box as well. There should be some basic skill sets and there should be some additional skill sets which should be you being IMC member and MEA policy maker. So it is a very necessary thing for Indians to send skilled workers or skilled workforce outside India, because the basic skill sets will be definitely there, but different countries have different additional skill sets because there are different machines used in different countries, different technology. If that course curriculum be embedded and a training center be incorporated in India so that we can better train them and can send across various countries, not only in Asia, outside Asia, in Europe or any other country. So it is a matter to which for you to think, for the professors to think and make it in a policy, so that in the curriculums of a higher education or an ITI or a nursing graduate can be embedded in these courses. I hope most of you will think the same.
Thanks so much, Mr. Kar. Surabhi, back to you now.
Thank you, Shabri, for a very enriching discussion, and I thank the distinguished panel. As usual, these panels are a way of reaching out to the stakeholders and to generate more ideas and discussions. As was mentioned by Shabri, we want to do this with other parts of the country as well. So we started with the southern states because, as was mentioned during the discussion as well, it's a differentiated capacity across India. Some states are good in some sectors, the others may have competencies in other sectors. So we wanted to start with South India, and some very interesting points have come up during today's discussion. I think I will take off from where Mr. Krishnan Narayanan left, that we need to, do a promotion on both sides to create that demand. So that point is very well taken care of, as well as the point mentioned by Professor Rajan that a critical skill level should be attained by people. And then on that, we do that top up of language, culture, and other soft skills training. So that was also a very valid point. Building a brand for Indian skills, how do skilling ecosystems in the country match up to the requirements of the destinations? These are some broader ideas with which we generated today's discussion, but going ahead, we would want to narrow down and funnel down to look at more micro issues of then going down sector specific and what do we do in a specific sector. So we have started on with this initiative, but we hope to engage you more going ahead on more such discussions. So once again, I thank all the panelists, the moderator, and everyone who has joined us today here to make the discussion a really enriching one. And before we close, as we do every single time, I would request everyone to turn on their cameras so we can take a virtual snap, and then we'll close.